All of you who are listening to us live, thank you so much for being here with us. We are excited to have you with us. And we are going to go ahead and have what I hope is going to be a really dynamic conversation. I first want to start by just introducing myself. My name is Lurie Daniel Favors. I am the Interim Executive Director at the Center for Law and Social Justice, which is a racial justice law center created in 1986 under the leadership of our wonderful founding Executive Director, Esmeralda Simmons. Ms. Simmons has since retired, and yet her presence is ever with us, and we thank her so much for the leadership that she showed in establishing our organization. Joining me today, we're going to be having a number of conversations this afternoon, and I really want to say thank you to all of you who are joining us via Facebook. This is our first Facebook Live at the Center for Law and Social Justice, but we are right now in some very strange times, and so we are really looking forward to having this conversation. This is going to be the inaugural discussion. We're going to be having Facebook Lives every Friday, and this is the first conversation dedicated to Black children and the census. And we're going to be looking at Black children, what's happening with education, how the census impacts all of this. And at the end of this conversation, we have a call to action, because this is not one of those Facebook Lives where you just listen and get information and go away. We need you to take action. There are things you can be doing right now. Our city has been ravaged by this virus. Our communities of African descent all over the city of New York are struggling right now. And so we are hopeful that this conversation will not only empower us, but give us some action steps and things that we can do in order to empower our community, empower our children, and ensure that we are as protected as possible. So first, I want to start by introducing my two guests. I'm so honored to have both of these women with me. And you'll see why once I get through with their bios, because they truly are fantastic and dynamic. And we're really grateful that they are part of our inaugural conversation. The first is Kara Benton-Smith. Miss Benton-Smith grew up in Westchester, New York, so she is a true New Yorker, just like some of the rest of you listening out there. She's about an hour outside of New York City. She's a graduate of Hofstra University. She has her bachelor's in psychology and Africana studies and a master of arts in industrial organizational psychology. She's been a human resources professional for 15 years. She spent time in the healthcare, media, and entertainment industries. And after moving to Brooklyn in 2005, where she is currently growing her roots, she's become an active member of Sankofa Community Empowerment and currently serves as the chairwoman for the board of Little Sun People, which is a daycare center that many of you may know. It is truly a gem, and we are really grateful to have her here. Kara is here in her capacity both as a member of that board of Little Sun People and as a parent activist. She and her husband live here in Brooklyn with their 3 children, and I'm really excited to have her with us. Next, who will be joining us will be Madina Toure, and I'm very excited about Ms. Toure because she is as one of my friends said, she's one of those reporters who you actually pay attention to because she tells the truth, and she does so in a way that is honorable and in a way that is factual, and she is a really powerful reporter, and she focuses on New York City K-12 education, higher education policy. She's a politics reporter at Politico. She also is a native New Yorker, and her family is from the Comoros Islands and Guinea. And she previously covered New York City politics for The Observer and general news in neighborhoods including Flushing, College Point, Whitestone, and Fresh Meadows for the Times Ledger newspaper in Queens. She is a phenomenal, brilliant mind. She is a graduate of Barnard College, and we are just very glad to have her with us. And she is heavily involved in New York City's African diaspora community. So thank you, and hello to both of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I appreciate it.
Yeah, same here. Thank you, Lurie. And pleasure meeting you as well.
Yeah, pleasure meeting you as well.
So for those of you who are joining us on Facebook, I'm going to ask that you share this event, that you invite your friends, start a watch party. We need to make sure that our communities are educated, that they are informed. And quite frankly, those of you who have been following the Center for Law and Social Justice, you know that for a very long time, we have been talking about issues of the census, how it relates to our communities. And this spring was supposed to be the culmination of the past 2.5 years of really hard work. We had a full campaign that included going door to door, business to business, every Black-owned barbershop, hair salon, daycare center, and faith-based institution in each of the 5 boroughs were going to get visits from us. We had materials, we still have materials for distribution, because we were really trying to make a concerted effort to reach our communities of African descent, so that they would be able to be empowered and fill out the census. Unfortunately, we, like the rest of you, are dealing with this virus. And I just want to say at the outset, For those of you who are suffering personally, those of you who have experienced loss, please know my heart goes out to you. We at the center have not been spared. Every single person on our staff has loved ones, friends who have been negatively impacted by this virus. We all see the news. We all know that right now, communities of African descent and Latinx communities are the ones really bearing the brunt of this virus. And so we just wanted to let you know that we are here with you and that we, like the rest of you, are adjusting and adapting as best as we can. And so I want to start out really, there are a couple goals with this conversation, and Cara and Madina, I'm really going to be looking to you to really present your expertise because you are the subject matter experts in your various areas. And I would really like to start first by getting both of you to just answer a simple question as to why you think filling out the census is important, and what are some of the attitudes that you've learned about what are some of the ways that you've learned about how our communities feel about the census and completing it in this current era? Madina, we can start with you.
All right, that's sure. Sounds good. I mean, yeah, it's generally speaking, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here to have this conversation. It's definitely important. I think in this, as we're in this pandemic, there's so many, things that are easy to forget, and the census is definitely one that's very important. So I think it's good that you guys are having this conversation. But yeah, why is the census important? I mean, we're talking about like over $600 billion in federal funding for just about everything: education, Title I programs, Head Start, special education, bilingual education, teacher training, preschool and after school programs, social services, public housing, congressional seats. This is something that's discussed a lot. I mean, I know that the city had lost, I think in the 2010 census, this New York State actually lost 2 congressional seats. So this is something that's critical as well. So it affects just about every aspect of people's lives. And, I would say that, we know that there are specific communities that have historically been undercounted. And I think, immigrant communities, low-income communities, minorities, maybe even LGBTQ individuals, so many vulnerable groups have been undercounted. And if you're undercounted, there are a lot of services that you won't receive. So I think that's broadly why it's so important.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with all of that. I beg to say that the census is critical. It is, it's do or die is what I would like to say. I think that many in our community don't realize all of the touch points that the census helps fund. And to our guest's point, it's everything from education down to healthcare. Down to, maybe you have a friend that's on Obamacare. Maybe you have friends who are on WIC. Maybe you have friends who are participating in other state, city, federal funded programs. It all channels down. And it's so important, particularly for communities of African descent, where we find ourselves disproportionately impacted by whatever it may be: a health crisis, education, speed bumps on a block where you have 3 children and people are speeding down the street. I mean, just little things like that. That is why it is so critical to fill out the census.
Right.
Yeah, thank you both for that. One of the examples we often give, because quite frankly, a lot of our community members don't know about the census. Whether you are part of the immigrant community in the African diaspora, whether you are an African American as a part of the African diaspora, a lot of our community members really just don't understand the basics about how the census works. And when it comes to our children, one of the examples we often give is, let's say you live in a community of 100 people. Let's call the community Wakandaville. I like Wakanda. You like Wakanda. Wakanda is a beautiful place. And in Wakandaville, let's say there are 100 families. And according to the census formulas for that year, communities like Wakandaville that have 100 families are supposed to get $1 per child in education resources. But if only 40 of those families in Wakandaville fill out the census, that means instead of getting $100 for education resources, they're only going to get $40 for education resources. But in September, when all of the Wakandaville children show up to school, all 100 of them show up, but they're only going to be educated on a budget that's appropriate for 40 of them. And when you think about what that looks like in terms of senior citizen services, what that looks like in terms of healthcare, which we are experiencing right now, you realize that when you don't show up for the census, you really are undercutting your ability to meet your community's basic needs. You know, Madina, you mentioned political power. Well, according to the census, you get the number of votes that you get in Congress and then your various halls of power through the census count. So again, if we're looking at Wakandaville, and according to the census formulas for that year, a community of 100 families like Wakandaville should get, let's say, 10 votes in their local elected city offices. They should get 10 votes in their state houses. They should get 10 votes in Congress. Well, if only 40 of those families in Wakandaville fill out the census, they're only going to get 4 of those votes, which means that when we go into battle with our legislators for everything from bail reform, culturally responsive education, adequate housing, adequate health care, we're literally short 6 of the votes that we would be entitled to because we did not have a full showing up on the census. And I think we're seeing that right now when it comes to hospitals, because unfortunately, our hospitals are also, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what community you live in, our hospitals are also funded based on census dollars. And right now in 2020, as we're dealing with this crisis, our hospitals and healthcare systems were funded back in 2010 and based on census counts that really showed us being undercounted, and our communities are still navigating with that struggle. And so to sort of pivot to that and sort of look at what's happening with the coronavirus and what's happening with our communities now, Madina, you are, dare I say, a phenomenal education reporter. When I tweeted out that we were going to be interviewing you, I got a lot of positive responses. People were very excited about this. One of my trusted colleagues said you are one of their favorite reporters. And you really had a stunning piece that looked at the realities of remote learning. Right now, all New York City, New York State children are home. And your article in Politico, Remote Learning Exacerbates Longstanding Hurdles for Low-Income Families, was really eye-opening. Even though I'm a parent navigating this, it was illuminating to really see what's happening across the city and the state. Can you describe some of the challenges that local families are having when it comes to having to engage in a homeschooling environment?
Right. No, yeah, thank you so much for that. That is very kind. And yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely, speaking to all the families, it was kind of a moving experience. I mean, there are people who have some really, really, really significant challenges, and it makes you appreciate what you have. I think generally speaking, a recurring issue is just like lack of access to devices. I think so. When the mayor and the chancellor first announced that the schools are going to be closed, they said something like 300,000 families need devices, which is such a huge number. And I think now at this time, the most recent figures that the chancellor gave was that 175,000 devices have been distributed. There are another 200,000 that need to be distributed, and I think 50,000 have been shipped already. So there's still families that, they're in situations where they don't have access to devices, so they just, either they're using iPads or they don't have anything to use, or, siblings are sharing laptops. I think also because people are, because now we have a situation where everyone's logging on at the same time. Internet connection is tough. Like even logging on to this panel, like it took a while for my internet to get together, as I'm sure, because we're all home now and we're all using it at the same time. So a lot of people are experiencing that. But, just to talk about the specific stories, like one of the people I interviewed, Naomi, she lives in the Bronx. She's in a 3-bedroom apartment. At first it was her and her mom and her brother and her 2 sisters. And then, due to circumstances that arose, her mom's sister came with her 5 children. So they're 11 in an apartment. And so now it's like you're working at home and, you have to deal with that. And she's a student at City College. She's studying. She's doing her online learning for her classes. And then her 15-year-old sister, I know she was saying that she had a certain amount of time to complete her assignments, but her 15-year-old sister is like working from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. because she wants to keep up with her grades and do well. So each one of them has to kind of deal with their specific assignments for online learning. And then they have to also manage their 5-year-old sister who's learning how to read and write. And they were saying things like, sometimes the website acts up. We're not trained to do this, so we're trying to make sure she's keeping up. So you have a situation like that. You have another family I spoke to that's like, okay, they're from the Dominican Republic. This woman has 3 kids. They're all English language learner students. 2 are in high school, 1's in middle school. They're sharing a laptop because the daughter got a device, but the others didn't. So they're navigating that. They also talked about how there were certain supports the school was giving them for English language learner students that they're not necessarily getting now. So those are some of the challenges that you're seeing. Another family that I spoke to in Queens, the mother was from Nepal. She said that her husband and her 2 kids are cramped in their apartment, and they all are like in their little corners trying to do their assignments. And, you know, she was even talking about cultural differences. She was like, okay, I'm from Nepal. I studied a certain way. It's hard for me to help my kids with their assignments. So those are just some examples of some of the challenges that families are dealing with. And, you know, students with disabilities, English language learner students, non-English speaking households, these are vulnerable groups. You know, they're dealing with their challenges as well. I know one thing I've been hearing in the African community, like, you know, they speak languages that may not fall within the 9 languages that the New York City Department of Education provides translations in. And some of the languages are oral, they're not written. So sometimes people need, you know, service, like they need to talk to someone on the phone, or sometimes there are literacy issues too. Like people, if you know, if there are families or parents who can't read or write, like that presents a challenge as well. So and then of course, like low income families are dealing with this in a bigger way.
Absolutely. You know, I was telling my daughter's teacher that I'm Gen X, so I learned how to add and subtract by carrying the 1. My daughter is learning a form of math I've never encountered before, other than what my son experienced, who's a little older. And I speak English. My daughter's teacher speaks English. We are both able to be fluent in those languages. And so I can only imagine what it must be like for families who have language barriers. One of the things that you mentioned also was just the way that income inequality can kind of show up in this way. We know that there are some schools, you know, we at our office received reports at the Center for Law and Social Justice that there were a number of students who were living in homeless shelters who were receiving laptops and devices, but some of the laptops and devices were missing some of the letters. And, you know, if you don't have the letter R or E on your keyboard, your ability to engage in just basic communication is really hampered. And, you know, you mentioned the Wi-Fi. You know, those of us who are experiencing Wi-Fi frustrations at home, imagine being in a building where you are sharing Wi-Fi access with an entire group of families, all of whom are similarly situated, and all of you have to navigate that space. And so when we're thinking about the long-term implications for education outcomes and for the inequalities that can exist there, the land right now is ripe for our children to really continue to experience this virus even long after it is ultimately concluded. And we are definitely praying for a quick resolution for that. Kara, you are a parent. And you have 3 beautiful children.
Yes.
Please tell them Mama Lurie says hello. As a parent, what have your experiences been like navigating this learning from home reality? And whether it's for your child who's a part of the DOE or your little one who is a part of the Little Sun People community?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm going to come from a little bit of a different perspective in that I do have a child that lives in the K through 12 world, right? She's 10 years old. She's actually in 5th grade. It's a graduating class. And so as a parent of a 5th grader, we all have those concerns around what does graduation look like? How do we ensure that the remote learning that they are receiving is going to prepare them to move on for the rigor of middle school, right? And so I think, I share with all my 5th grade parents that concern and worry and how do we compensate, even with all of the tools. So I can't imagine for those who are struggling with, don't have the tools, don't have the access, maybe don't have the language. I mean, it's just, it compiles on and on and on. But the perspective I want to give now is around Little Sun People and early education. So this idea of what is happening to the children who are 2 through 5, who have not hit kindergarten yet, who may have not gone off to UPK yet. The only way I could describe that experience, because I have children in both arenas, right? I have a 5th grader, but I also have a 2-year-old who has started at Little Sun People in September and was blossoming. And now I have him home. And for a 2-year-old to do remote learning, first of all, I have to give credit where credit is due to Little Sun People, who is doing remote learning for 2, 3, and 4-year-olds. That is amazing, because I don't know of anyone who's doing that. set me wrong, Facebook family, set me wrong, Center for Long Justice, set me wrong, but I don't know anyone who's attempting to do this for a 2-year-old. So let's just say that. In that, and in that challenge, you know, for that age group, contact is critical. That's how they learn. And so it has been a real challenge, but also a blessing simultaneously. Little Sun People is an amazing community and an amazing school for children of African descent who really not only get an amazing academic introduction, right? They also get such care and such compassion from clearly, you know, all the educators that are there, Fela Barcliffe, who is our amazing founder and executive director. But there's also a great parent community as well. And so we are helping each other. We are banding through this as we attempt to have our 2, 3, and 4-year-olds engage in remote learning. And you know, some days are great. The kids are connecting, they're waving, they're doing their ABCs, their 1, 2, 3s, and all of that. And some days are really hard. There are tantrums, there are meltdowns, there is concern about regression. You know, my child was using the bathroom perfectly fine, now they're not. And so there are some social emotional things that we're seeing play out in our youngest of learners that may look a little different for the older children, whom I'm positive are also experiencing some social emotional challenges and stress and anxiety around this idea that I have to be confined to a place. Even though that place is familiar to me, it is my home, it is still a confine. And so the ability to be able to still push through that and have a learning experience has been really challenging for our littlest ones. And they're desperate to hug their teachers and their friends and have that connection. And so it has been a challenge. But I will say that we at Little Sun People are grateful for the leadership and the direction of our executive director, who was firm in saying that we are going to stay connected by any means necessary. And so we're grateful for that.
Thank you so much for that. You know, both of my children are graduates of Little Sun People, and so I know well and personally the commitment that you're speaking of. And you know, one of the things that this reminds me of is the fact that really funding is a significant part of all of this, right? And so when we think about the funding that our daycare centers have access to or don't, it really can make the difference between closing your doors completely and still being able to maintain some sort of connection to your students, to the parent communities that many of our organizations have worked so hard to create. Madina, you are familiar with a lot of the budgetary realities of an education system. And, you know, there's been a lot of conversation about the proposed budget cuts. There's a number of cuts coming for the Department of Education. Summer youth employment was cut. What do we know about what's happening with the budget for New York City school students, and what should parents be thinking about as they plan to go forward?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely something that's been a major topic of conversation this past week, and I mean for forever basically. But there have been some significant cuts with respect to education. I know that a lot of advocates and parents are frustrated. You know, there's I think the city put out this budget that has about $827 million. In you know, cuts to save money, and these are cuts specifically in the area of education. So there are things like a hiring freeze, you know, less counseling, cuts in operating expenses, and also, you know, things they've announced like the early childhood education for 3-year-olds, which is like one of the city's like signature initiatives. You know, they're delaying the expansion of that to a couple districts. So that's something that's upset people. People are like, well, you know, some families were looking forward to having those programs, having the option of applying to them. You know, there's also like, another thing is fair student funding. And that's, you know, this is a formula that provides funding for, you know, it's like funneling more money into high need schools. That's another area where we're seeing cuts. I know you mentioned the summer youth employment program. That's definitely a big one. You know, this is something that, you know, keeps students engaged, you know, making money, providing for yourself and your family. I know that that's something that's really frustrated people. I actually recently spoke with a provider who, like, when the city first announced, he was like, well, we learned about this very recently. You know, I have to lay people off, and that creates this whole situation. So that's another area where people have been upset. There's also some money that's being eliminated from programs that help students, like, get into college, provides counseling for middle school students. There's definitely a lot of areas where we're seeing cuts, and it's definitely going to have an impact moving forward, especially like when you talk about fair student funding. I know some advocates have kind of pointed out to me that, well, not all schools are receiving 100% of their funding. So, this makes things worse. I mean, this is kind of the difference between being able to, pay for school supplies and all sorts of things. And, so I think that's one thing that obviously is partially tied to the pandemic. We can't eliminate that context, but, going forward, it's going to have a longer term impact. And, we were talking about remote learning and some of the experiences of like low income individuals. One individual I spoke to for my story, he kind of made the point, which I thought was striking, is that, the learning deficit can be overcome, but like the sort of the long-term, future educational and economic gaps, we had a very, very tense conversation about segregation in the city's public school system. He kind of made the point, which I thought was striking, is that, you're going to have whole classrooms of people who haven't been able to log on and keep up with assignments. And what impact is that going to have moving forward, getting them up to speed, versus a whole classrooms of people who have been able to log on and keep up and who already have access. And sometimes we overestimate the extent to which people are familiar with technology. I mean, these are specific online learning tools. Like, we think young people know how to navigate. I mean, maybe they know how to use TikTok and certain apps, but there's a learning curve for parents and even for students, especially those who are elementary school students. So, between the budget cuts and some of the lost time in remote learning, like, all of these things are going to have impacts on students' educational experiences moving forward, and maybe even test scores when we have tests again. So.
That's one of the things that everything that you just said is part of what keeps me up at night as a parent, as an advocate, as someone who my whole, from sun up to sundown, is sort of dedicated to thinking about how these issues are impacting communities of African descent. And I was talking to a reporter recently about the coronavirus and its impact on Black communities. And they asked me, are you a medical expert? I said, no, I'm a racial disparities expert. And what I know, even without being a medical expert, is that when it comes to this virus, there are three primary areas that are really coming together and unifying in ways that are just having just horrific effects. One is, yes, healthcare. So again, as we mentioned, healthcare is funded in part based on census dollars. And when your community has a low census count, you don't have access to the full amount of funding that you need for healthcare facilities. So when we think about the number of hospitals that have closed throughout New York City over the past 10, 15 years, I saw one report that said there have been 16 hospitals that have shut down over the city, 4 of which were in Brooklyn alone. Brooklyn is one of the largest cities in our country. When you're talking about, access to even non-urgent care options for communities of African descent, often the emergency room is our first line of defense. That is our first visit to the healthcare community. And, when this virus sort of showed up and we realized what's happening with the emergency rooms and what's happening with the hospitals, that's literally one of the most dangerous places that you can be. And yet at the same time, we look at our ability to engage in work. And there's reporting that speaks to the fact that only 1 in 5 people of African descent, that's 20% of our community, have the luxury, and it is indeed a luxury, to be able to work from home, which means the vast majority of our community that is engaged in employment and having to feed their families, right now they are out delivering foods, they are in warehouses packaging materials, they are Uber drivers, they are drivers who are folks who are ensuring that really the essential functionings of the city continue. They literally are the defining face for what is essential. And then you look at policies that have a broader impact, like what's happening in our prisons and what's happening in the incarcerated spaces where, people who are incarcerated in New York State are able to make hand sanitizer for the rest of us to purchase. But because hand sanitizer contains a high alcohol content, they can't actually use the hand sanitizer because it's considered contraband. They don't have access to proper water and access to soap and cleaning spaces. And so we really are seeing just sort of a confluence of issues that are really contributing to this virus impacting our communities in ways that are quite extensive. And then when you think about that in the context of education, you know, Madina, everything that you just said really is something that we have to think about. It's not just what's happening right now. It's what is this going to do to the gap that already existed? What is this going to do for parents who are trying to make sure their children have a shot at college, let alone a shot at a specialized high school? Parents who are, you know, really in a sense competing with other families who are better economically situated, who are going to be able to fill in those gaps, who are going to be able to ensure that their child has their own Wi-Fi station. Maybe they're taking their tests in a quiet room where they're able to engage and study without being disturbed, as compared to many of our children who are in housing situations where they are doubled up, tripled up. Our children are far more likely to be living in housing insecure spaces. So when it comes to just the dollars and cents, not just of today, but the long-term impact, we really are in a moment where our children are being set up in ways that can be quite harmful for them. And so, Cara, with that, I kind of want to turn to you and ask from a parent's perspective, what are your thoughts about this? What are some questions and concerns that you have, or even suggestions that you have that we as parents need to be thinking about, we as advocates need to be thinking about when it comes to preparing for what this reality is going to look like? That's a layered and real question. The first thing I think I will say is I can't reiterate how critical the census is. I think we just have to fill it out. We have to fill it out. We have to count every single body in our household. That means if cousin Shaniqua has been staying with you for 2 months and she's kind of here, but she kind of isn't there, as far as the census is concerned, she lives with you, check her off. Any child that lives with you, any adult that lives with you, in the corona times, in the other times, right now, fill it out. I think that is what we can do. I think oftentimes we know the statistics, we know that we're at risk, we know how our communities are treated. I think one of the things that we have to start becoming more comfortable with is finding our own solutions. And we have an easy one: fill out the census. Takes 2 minutes. I don't want to hear the talk about, I'm scared of the government. Yes. The government has not treated us the way that we should be treated. I recognize that, and I'm not going to pretend that that's not real. But what I also know is a bulk of us go shopping, a bulk of us shop online. And if you do that in any capacity, whether it's Amazon or something else, they already know who you are. They already know where you're at. So you might as well fill out the census, right? And so I think that that is one of the most critical things that we have to do. Fill out that census. Ensure you're counting every single person that's in your home, including your children, all of them, whether they're yours, whether they're your niece, your nephew, what have you, and also check BLAC. But I'm sure Lurie's going to get into that in a minute. So I digress. But as a parent, I think about all of my children. I have a 10-year-old, a 2-year-old, as I mentioned. I also have a 7-month-old. When it comes to education, and I think about the amazing start that all my children have had so far with Little Some People and my little one to come, I think about early childhood centers like Little Some People. They are not huge entities in the grand scheme of when we think about education. We are a DOE center in that we have a UPK program, UPK4 program. And listen, all that funding conversation that we just had and the cuts that we referenced, that is massively impactful to Little Some People. I mean, we hire summer youth for our summer program that we have over the summer. What is that going to look like now? We have UPK program. What cuts around the DOE? What's that going to look like for our UPK program? So many things I can think about that are so impactful for Little Some People in the early childhood arena, as well as the full education arena. And so I think that's what keeps me up at night. I worry about how do we continue to provide this service with limited funding, with no funding in some instances, in many instances. I know Little Some People has applied for any and everything that we are eligible for, and we have already gotten back some rejections, right? No, we don't have the funding to support you, so sorry. So it is important, I think,
for parents to feel empowered to change that trajectory, and fill out that census for sure. And also contribute to your institutions that are supporting and are purposeful about supporting our children, right? We have a campaign going on, LSP 365, you can find it on our website. Any little bits helps. We're doing $1 a day campaign. We are a community institution. And so for 40 years to be in existence, that didn't happen by happenstance. And it certainly didn't happen with relying on, in totality, the city, state, and federal. Certainly, we took advantage of those as we are entitled to, but the support really came from the community. And so we reach out again at this time to say, let's support each other so we can ensure an institution like Little Some People and many more that remain unnamed are supported during this time, but always, right? So.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, I think that when it comes to recognizing what we can do in these moments, we often do feel paralyzed because, you know, my husband and I, our family is on week 5, almost week 6 of quarantine. It was, you know, at first it was a little adventurous. And then, you know, frankly, we started hearing the reports about families and friends and folks who were impacted by this virus. It has been heartbreaking at times. Quite frankly, we know of people and have even experienced, you know, loss within our own personal lives. And so, you know, it can feel paralyzing. And so I appreciate you reminding us that one thing we can do is make sure that our children are going to at least have access to the funding and the political power that they need. And those are things that are within our control. You know, when the Census 2020 first came out and we found out that it was going to be digital and online, quite frankly, I will be honest with you, I was petrified. 45 had just been elected. Well, 45 had just been put into office. And so, you know, I was worried about cybersecurity. I was worried about a whole host of things. And now I'm thanking God that you can literally pick up your phone and go to my2020census.gov and fill out this form. There are 10 questions. It takes less than 10 minutes, and it will literally determine the next 10 years of funding for our children, the next 10 years of funding for our healthcare systems, the next 10 years of political power that we have access to. And before we close out, I'm going to make sure that we are all clear about how we can do that as best we can. Madina, do you have any thoughts, you know, as we're winding down, do you have any thoughts about what educators can be doing, how parents and educators can be working together to really help think about what will be the best ways to fill in some of these gaps that we know are going to show up in our children's education? Right.
No, that's definitely a good question. I mean, I think, you know, what I've been seeing is that teachers have been sort of looking for innovative ways to help their students. I know one teacher that I've been speaking with a lot, Isla Tawhid, who's at the Linden Tree Elementary School in the Bronx. She set up a website like specifically for her class. And so she uploaded a video where she literally, it's like her showing people how to log on, how to do every little thing. She spends a lot of time, and, you know, and this, I think this is one thing that's been kind of overwhelming for her. She spends a lot of time like fielding calls from parents who need advice on how to log in and how to do this and that. And, you know, she has like little sections for all the assignments, things like, so I know teachers are doing things like that. I know teachers are, you know, they're making videos, they're calling students individually. I've heard about people like doing stuff on Google. I know one teacher I spoke to, I think Jose Wilson, I think he was telling me that he, you know, he kind of set up a thing where, or maybe it was another teacher, I can't remember. But anyway, they were talking about how, you know, even on Google Classroom, there's like a little area where you can, you know, chat, the teachers and students can chat. So sometimes he'll open it up and say, okay, like if you have any other concerns or any things that, you know, you want to discuss. I know I spoke with a high school senior at the KIPP High School in the Bronx, and she was saying that even amongst students, like they've created a group specifically for seniors so that they can talk about the specific concerns and issues that they have. They had like a whole group text conversation about that. They're trying to do stuff in Instagram Live. That same teacher, Jose Wilson, he did an Instagram Live where, you know, teachers from all over the country can listen in and hear about his approaches. And so I think people are trying to like use technology to kind of create support systems and groups. I've heard of teachers who are like sending videos of them, TikTok videos of themselves singing and dancing. So it seems like and even on the parent side, I've spoken with parents who, like, they have WhatsApp group chats where everyone's talking about, different approaches. I spoke with Josh Gold, who's at Uber and led the mayor's universal pre-K campaign. He said that, we have he has a child who's in a UPK program. He said that there's a WhatsApp group chat where they all kind of discuss things, share photos, share best practices. So it seems like that's what people are trying to do. They're trying to share what's working for them, what's not. Teachers are speaking amongst each other. Even I see conversations happening on social media as well, where people are kind of talking about their experiences and the challenges that they're dealing with. So it seems like people are that seems like to be a way for people to kind of, help each other as we're navigating this experience. And I think I did actually see, I believe it was Rima Amin from Chalk Beach. She had tweeted something about how, the DOE has put out a survey now to get a sense of how remote learning is going for people. And like, they've like broken up. Yeah, I looked at it really quickly. They broke it up by boroughs. So I think it seems like the DOE is trying to like figure out what people's experiences are, what issues people are having as well, because there's kind of varying levels of experience.
Thank you for that. I think that was very encouraging for me. So I don't know if anyone else got anything out of that. I personally feel better that at least there are efforts being made, that this is being paid attention to. And we've got some folks in the chat room who are saying shout out to the teachers. Yes, shout out to all the teachers. Yeah. I don't know about y'all, but I feel like teachers should be paid $1 billion a week. I know my children's teachers, God bless you, God bless you, God bless you. I value you. So, I mean, I've always valued education, but right now I think many parents are going to be way more keyed into equity fights that our teachers are engaged in, making sure they are fairly compensated, justly compensated, because the work they are doing is phenomenal. So I want to thank you both for that. And before we wind down, I want to just go ahead and share with you all who are watching this via Facebook Live some important information. It's important that you are aware that we have been continuing the work for the census. If you visit our website, CLSJ.org, you can sign up for our newsletter here. That will allow you to stay in touch with us. Right now, we are in the midst of Black Census season. We were really excited that a number of groups had put together a Black Census Week, which was an effort to ensure that communities of African descent were going to be represented. We expanded that to Black Census season because we want our communities to know that we are here. We have the next 10 weeks of programming that we are going to be rolling out. This week, we are looking at Black children in the census, which is where this conversation came from. If you visit our website, clsj.org, you can find a host of materials and information that you can use, resources about our work with the New York City Black Leadership Advisory Coalition for Census 2020. And I also want to take us to, let's see if I can find it here. There is a special website that has become a fundamental part of my life, and it is the 2020census.gov. My2020census.gov is a website you can go to right now, literally, like right now, I want everybody to pick up your phone. You can pick up your phone. You can literally go to my2020census.gov on your phone. You can fill out the census in 10 minutes. You can call 1-844-330-2020. And yes, I have the number memorized because your girl has been trying to get as many people as possible to fill it out. You can also fill out the census on the phone. We were just informed by the Census Bureau that the paper forms have gone out to every single address. So if you have not gotten your paper form yet, you should by the end of next week. It's in the mail. God bless the post office, and may we all preserve the post office, because right now we know the post office is under attack. But for those of you who are trying to be a part of this, I want you to pick up your phone right now and open it up and go to your contacts app and literally start at the letter A. And at the letter A, I want you to start texting your friends. I want you to start texting your family. Include the link to my2020census.gov. You are able to literally have them fill out that census form online, and they will be able to, in 10 minutes, answer those 10 very basic questions and determine the political power and resources that our children are going to have or not for the next 10 years of their lives. And last thing before I finally let everyone go, Kara had mentioned Check Black. And I want to thank you, Kara, because you know how I feel about Check Black, right? Yeah. For the first time on the 2020 census, communities of African descent are not going to have to choose between identifying as a nationality versus identifying as a race. This is hugely important, particularly for those of us who live in New York City, which is one of the most diverse parts of this country. Because in New York City, we have literally people from all over the Pan-African diaspora. I think when Marcus Garvey was thinking about his red, black, and green flag and thinking about who was in the diaspora, he probably had places like New York City in mind, because you literally have representation from every Pan-African country, nation, community, island, borough, state, right here in the city of New York. However, if I am someone who immigrated to this country, maybe I'm from Jamaica, shout out to my mother's family, and I immigrated here, I identify perhaps as a Jamaican person. I'm perhaps a Jamaican citizen. I'm someone who identifies with that. If I'm from Nigeria, I may identify as a Nigerian person. I may identify as Igbo, as Hausa, as Yoruba. I may identify ethnically. And all of those identifications make up the beautiful mosaic about who we are as people of African descent. However, and this is important, in this country, in these United States, in this country, people of African descent have a wonderful mosaic, but only racial categories are going to be able to be used to allow us to go in and fight for civil rights protections, voting rights protections, and anti-discrimination protections. And so what we need people to understand is that for the first time on the 2020 census, you don't have to choose. You'll be able to write down your nationality, and you can check Black for your race. And I know everyone doesn't identify as Black. I know it's a political term, although trust me, I think you should. It's a beautiful place. Join us. It's a beautiful thing. But for various reasons, not everyone who is a part of the Pan-African diaspora identifies as Black. That is your personal choice, and whatever you think about that word when you are by yourself or with your family and loved ones, that's up to you. But what you have to know is that in this country, Black is what we call a protected racial category, which means that I can go into court. I can go and fight for legislation on the basis of race in ways that I simply cannot on the basis of your nationality or your national identification as a Nigerian or a Jamaican or a Dominican. And so we need to be clear and sophisticated with how these systems work and how we can use these systems to better the lives of our community. So if you are someone who, I don't know, let's say you're driving along, minding your business, and the police were to pull you over and think that you are a Black person, regardless of how you identify, for the purposes of race, you are Black. So what we need people to recognize is that you can write down your nationality. You can write in Jamaican. You can write in Nigerian. What I tell people is, listen, take your Ancestry.com, do your 23andMe, find out all of the wonderful ways that you can identify. You can write in as many nationalities as you want. However, for race, we are asking that you are sophisticated enough to be able to check Black so that we can make sure our communities have the voting rights protections, the civil rights protections, the anti-discrimination protections that we all need now more than at any other point, at least in my lifetime. So that's two things I need you to do. I need you to pick up the phone. I need you to text everybody from A to Z and whatever other letters you and characters you may have in there. Tell them to go to my2020census.gov. You can literally fill it out online. I need you to then, once you text everybody, I'd say give them a day or two, then pick up the phone again and call them. We need you to be a part of our personal phone banking team. Why? Because as I mentioned at the beginning, the Center for Law and Social Justice had a phenomenal street team effort planned in the works. We've been working on it for years, and yet coronavirus had other plans in mind. So we need you to join our phone banking team. We need you, if you've got free nights and weekends, you got the ability to call at any time of day without worrying about it, pick up your phone, text your family, text your friends, ask them to go to my2020census.gov, ask them to call 844-330-2020. That's 844-330-2020 to fill out the census. We have got to make sure our communities are counted. It is so important, and it's never at any point been more important and more clear to me as to how important this is than it is right now. So I think that's everything I have to say. Madina or Kara, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'll go. First, I want to thank you ladies both for having me. I'm totally honored and critical conversation, particularly in these times. And secondly, Little Sun People, please visit us. Please learn about us, littlesunpeople.com. Beautiful gem in the heart of Bed-Stuy, serving preschoolers ages 2 through 5. Please visit our website, littlesunpeople.com. We have an active COVID fundraiser happening, LSP 365, to help us through this unprecedented, unplanned, unpredicted crisis that we're going through. And we want to ensure, you know, when this all settles, that our children have a place to go back to. So we appreciate your support. Please visit us. Please learn about us and the amazing work that our teachers, our staff, And of course, at the helm, our executive director, Mama Fela Barcliff, is doing and support the effort.
Thank you for that. Madina?
Yeah, well, it was a pleasure to chat with both of you. Very important conversation. And I just, Kara, I'd love to talk to you at some point. I mean, I'm going to be continuing to report on remote learning. I'd love to look at what's happening with the census as well. So, if anyone ever wants to talk, I'm always looking to speak with parents and teachers and families and getting the perspectives of different communities and different, issues. So, and Black communities are certainly a part of that. I definitely wanted to speak with all of you. So if anyone ever wants to talk, I'm on Twitter and all the different social media platforms. So I'm happy to chat, but this was definitely a very important conversation. So thank you for having me.
Thank you both so much. And thank you to all of you who joined us via Facebook. We are going to be making this as a recorded video. We'll also be sharing it via our YouTube platform. We invite you to follow us at Instagram at CLSJ_MEC. That's C for Center, L for Law, S for Social, J for Justice, _MEC for Medgar Evers College. We're at Twitter. We are on Instagram. We are here on Facebook. And we appreciate you. We ask that you join us again next week. This week was Team Black Children. Next week is Team Black Women. I want to thank all of our CUNY Census students who have been writing articles and putting together graphics for us. Thank you, Imani Dawson, who's managing our communications, Donna Lennon, who is our deputy director. Very much appreciate our full team. We will see you here next week, Friday, where we will have another in-depth conversation with some dynamic women who are going to be talking with us about the census, Black women, and how we need to be thinking, moving, and organizing our communities to keep our people and our families safe. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much. We appreciate it.